So, jazakumullah khair for being here on a nice summer day outside. Is there a soccer game today or no? No? Type. Tuesday? You know the schedule already, right? But subhanAllah, I feel like sometimes in the summer, it's like fighting with the nafs on a nice weather to come in, right? Especially on a Sunday, where it could be outside, barbecuing or canoeing or whatever the case is, inshallah. But alhamdulillah, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering and make it the one that has the more reward and success, inshallah. That being said, important question, right? Two things today. I think as we go into, I guess, July and August, I don't know how the attendance is going to be. So I want to take your opinion whether should we continue or with there's time off I'm taking between August 2nd to the 15th. So it's like we're going to miss, I guess, what, two Sundays? One Sunday. One Sunday, I think. But anyway, I don't know if you guys want to continue in the summer or take a break. I have no idea. We do have Halaqa Fridays. So it's up to you guys. Because you guys attend the most, mashallah, so I want to take your opinion. Take a break? Tayyib, do you want to take a break from when? August or next week? Huh? School is what? So like second week of September? Isn't it after Labor Day weekend? Oh, this year it's early? Khalas, okay. طيب, we'll figure out when to start again. The other thing is I feel like today's halaqa might be a bit too long because we are going to try to do 3 names together, right? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I don't know, it might be a bit too long because we're going to do Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, and Musawwir because they are connected, right? So I guess we can play it by ear, see how much we can cover. If we cover half and we still have time, we can cover the other half. If not, then we might continue next week and then end after next week. Does it sound good? طيب. So today, inshallah, as I mentioned, we're gonna look at 3 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, Al-Musawwir, which the rough translation is the creator. That's Al-Khaliq. Al-Bari is the originator or the maker. Al-Musawwir is the fashioner. Right? And I'm going to explain why I picked those names, inshallah. So as usual, inshallah, we're gonna look at the linguistic meaning, right, in language, and then the meaning pertaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the fruits of believing in that name, and then how we can integrate those names in our lives, like what's our share of those things, right? And so you can understand why it's going to take a bit longer because we're talking about theory, although I'll try to summarize as much as I can. But, I plan and Allah plans, right? And He's the best of planners. So we're going to start with the Al-Khaliq, right? Al-Khaliq. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard those 3 names before, right? And Al-Khaliq, now we're going to talk about more linguistically, right? Al-Khaliq over here, in the Arabic language, right? I'm going to mention, of course, as usual, some of the scholars what they mentioned, but generally speaking, in the Arabic language, Al-Khaliq has 2 aspects. And its meaning has 2 aspects. The first is initiating something upon a newly originated model, right? Something that is novel, like creating something that is novel, essentially, without any sort of precedent. There's nothing like it before. The other side, or the other meaning it includes, is more of a estimation or proportioning, a taqdeer, right? Proportioning or estimation. And so Imam al-Azhari rahimahullah, he said that the root of al-Khaliq is estimation, taqdir. So he looked at that aspect. Imam al-Jawhi rahimahullah, he said al-Khalq is estimation. It is said خلقت الجلد, right? So essentially I'm going to use the word created, but over here it means more of I created the leather, but it's not over here. خلق leather over here means I kind of like measured and estimated before cutting it, right? Ibn Faris rahimahullah, he said the letters of the kha, the lam, and the qaf, right, form two root principles. One of them is the measuring, estimation of things, and the other is the smoothness of things, right? And so now he brought another added meaning. Imam al-Tayyibi rahimahullah, he said al-Khaliq comes from khalaq, and its root is precise estimation. So it's not just estimation over here, saying precise estimation. It also applies to origination, which is ibda', al-ibda', origination, which is bringing something into existence without a prior model. Right? So over here now he implemented the two other meanings, and this is how I summarized in the beginning what it means. Right? So that is in the language what al-Khaliq means. Two aspects: creating something without precedence, something novel, or has estimation, something estimation associated with it. Can it include both? Of course. It can mean that you bring something novel, right, with the precision and the planning and the estimation of it. Because generally speaking, you can't do the one without the other. Wallahu a'lam. Generally speaking. طيب. Al-Bari, the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn al-Arabi, he said, Al-Bari means to be cleared or freed of something. To be cleared or freed from something. So he said, Bari'a is to be purified or distanced. So cleared or distanced, to be purified. And then also he said, Bari'a is to excuse and warn something. And from this is the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he said, Inna Allah bari'un wa rasuluh. Right? Inna Allah bari'un wa rasuluh, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares bara'a, which means free of something. Distance from something, him and his messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And min al-kafirin al-mushrikeen and so forth. So meaning it's more like an excuse and a warning. Be careful, Allah is innocent of you, the Prophet is innocent of you, distance themselves from you. And then he said, rahimahullah, Ibn Arabi, he said, and it is said, he became bari'a min al-marad, which means he became free of illness, or cured from illness, which is like saying healthy and sound. So bari'a, when they say hu bari'a min al-marad, like bari'a, which means that he is cured. So it's an aspect also distancing yourself from the disease. And he said, abra'ahu Allah, which means Allah cured him from the illness completely. Abra'ahu Allah. And so over here, he's shining more of a dimension on bari'a, which means to clear or be free of something. Ibn Faris, on the other hand, he said the ba and ra and hamza, bari'a, they come from two root principles to which the branches of this category return. One of them is creation, al-khalq. Now he's saying over here now, bari'a or bari also means khalq. He said, Allah bara'a an-nasama. Allah created the creation. The other root is distancing and separating from something. So like Ibn Arabi, but however now he added another dimension that also comes in the meaning of creation. Imam al-Tayyibi rahimahullah, he said al-bari comes from bur, and its root is a thing being cleared and separated from another. So repeated meaning in. He said this is either by way of removal, as in their saying, so and so is bari'a min al-marad, so cured from illness, so it's removal from it, and the bari'a min ad-dayn, which means that he's cleared from his debt, from debtor, or by way of originating. Over here comes the originating, which means like a creation, and it comes from Allah. Al-Bari al-Nafs, Bara al-Nafs, which means he's the creator of the Nafs. And so he said, it is also said, Al-Bari is the creator who is entirely free, bari'a, free over here, from consistencies and disharmony that would disrupt the order of the universe. So over here now he's bringing another image. So he's like, it's not just creation, but it's more of a creation that is separate and away from any sort of inconsistencies and disharmony. Okay, so it's not just a creation, but a creation with something added meaning. All right, so this is al-khaliq and al-bari'. I'm going to summarize all this again, inshallah. Now, al-musawwir, right? Al-musawwir, Imam al-Tayyibi, rahimahullah, he said, it means the originator of the forms of creation, arranging them according to the requirements of wisdom. Right? So when you fashion something based on a specific wisdom, so it's not just creation, but now you're arranging things in a specific order, right? You're fashioning it. Al-Jawhari said, al-sawar means inclination or leaning. Now there's another meaning, right? Al-sawar, which means to incline or to lean towards something. And so he said, rajulun aswar, a man who is aswar, means he is inclined and longing. So he's inclined to something. Asarrahu, which means that he is made, he had made it inclined. So when you incline something towards you, asarrahu aswarahu ilayk. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said, sawwarahu, Allah sawwarahu into a beautiful form. Sawwarahu fi ahsani surah, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fashioned him in the most beautiful of images. So he took form. So essentially that took form. So this is what Ibn Jawhari said. Ibn Faris said, sawwarahu means he inclines. Again, there's a repeated meaning of inclines. So he said, I inclined the thing to you. Sawwartuhu ilayk. Right? I inclined the thing to you. And from it comes a surah. Right? A surah, which means over here image or form. From every, the form of every created thing, and its plural is suwar, images, which is the shape of its creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exalted is al-bari al-musawwir. So over here, that's why I said fashion, right? Because you're fashioning it in a specific image. Now, in some of the dictionaries, like in Lisan al-Arab, they said that that as-sawar means inclination, and aswar means a man man means an inclined one, right? When it comes to a person, inclined one. And so then he said, I inclined it to the thing, right? فَصَوَّرْنَاهُ إِلَيْكَ, which means that we inclined them and gathered. فَصُرْهُ إِلَيْكَ. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when Ibrahim alayhi salam said, أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى, right? He said, فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ, which means gather them to yourself, right? فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ, and then chop them. فَجْعَلْ عَلَى كُلِّ جَبَلٍ مِنْهُنَّ جُزْءًا. So this is where it comes from. فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. Now and then he said تصورته, the word تصورته, which means to imagine something, right? Like to picture it in your mind. To picture it in your mind means it appeared in your mind. And then he said التصوير means statues or likeness. Taswir surah over here, statue has. So if you look at it, over here has a lot of aspect of fashioning, making it to look like something specific, forming it in one way, right? So in this case, now I'm just going to mention something over here. Some of the scholars, they will use these words interchangeably to mean to create. But I'm trying to point out the linguistic difference between them, that they can have different meanings. They can have overlapping but a bit different meanings. And so the word al-khaliq over here, it implies making something out of nothing, right? Actually, no, that's the English word. In the Arabic, it means estimation, measuring, and planning. Okay, estimation, measuring, and planning. Because in English, creation implies what? Create something out of nothing. Okay, but in the Arabic language, khalaq over here is estimate, measure, and stuff. Yes? Bada'a, which means to start something. Well, in the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it means from nothing also, right? But we'll get to that when we say al-mubdi' al-mu'id, to other names. Shall we get there, right? Al-mubdi' al-mu'id. So he initiated and he yu'id, which means repeat it or bring it again, So yes, but over here in the Arabic language, khalaqa, right, is they're talking about more linguistically, but once again, there's the two other meanings, but estimating, measuring, or planning. And once again, the metaphor is the Arabic used for like leather workers who carefully measure like a piece of like of the hide before they cut it. Type and al-bari' it carries like the dual meaning of to create or originate and to separate, right? To be separate or clear from, or also includes heal, separate from like his illness from the illness, because the body like your body is separated from the disease. Because that's where it comes from. And the musawwir, the last one, it revolves around the linguistically inclination, shaping, and forming. Okay, so when it comes to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as usual, you're going to find there's a bit of a connection to the language, right? The linguistic one associated with it. What time did we start today? Huh? We started 45? Okay. So when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Al-Khaliq, we're going to start with Al-Khaliq over here. It was mentioned in the Quran in 11 places. Right? It was mentioned in the Quran in 11 places. Out of all of them, Al-Khaliq was mentioned the most. Right? I'm not using the word Al-Khallaq and the derivatives, but Al-Khaliq was mentioned 11 times. Now, Mujahid radiallahu anhu, he said that regarding when he's talking about the verse Wallahu ahsanul khaliqeen, that Allah is the best of the creators, he said because over here Allah is the best of creators, it means that there's also others that create, right? So he's commenting on that. He said they manufacture or they create, and Allah manufactures or Allah creates, and Allah is the best of creators, manufacturers, right? So this is what he means. Al-Azhari rahimallah, he said among the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Khaliq. He also added Al-Khallaq to it, Al-Khaliq. And it is not permissible to use this attribute with the definitive article Al, right? You cannot use that for anyone other than Allah. So you cannot say I am Al-Khaliq, right? You can't say that with the alif and lam, which is the definite article. And so then he said, he is the one who brought all things into existence after they did not exist. So now he's using al-khalaq over here, more of bring out of existence. And then he said, the root of khalaq is estimation. Thus, in consideration of estimating the existence of things, and in consideration of bringing them into existence according to that estimation. Right? So he said, he is the creator, huwa al-khalaq. And so he still brought in that estimation. That is before you bring it in, there has to be an estimation. And like anybody who kind of, doesn't matter what it is, when you try to do something, we always kind of have an estimation of what it is, it's in our mind, and then the execution comes afterwards. Imam al-Khattabi, he said, Al-Khaliq is the originator of creation and its inventor without any prior model. Remember we said Al-Khaliq over here means innovative based, like there's no precedence to it. Now he also said, as for describing human, the meaning of khallaq is estimation or shaping, as he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, khalaqtuhu thumma sawwartu, right? I designed, which means khalq over here, for you, min teen, from clay, also sadin. Actually, you know what, let me use the verse from Isa alayhi salam. وأني أخلق لكم من الطين كهيئة الطير. وأني أخلق لكم من الطين كهيئة الخير, which means I design, right, for you from clay a form of a bird. Right, so over here now it's like creating that form. Zajjaj rahimahullah, he said, Khalaqa, regarding the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the initiation of a thing's estimation. So Allah is the creator and originator, and He is its completer and manager. So, best is Allah, the best of the creator. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the best of the creator. Al-Halim rahimahullah, he said, its meaning, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who categorized, originated things, assigned a specific measure to each category. And so it comes the aspect of measuring again. Thus, He brought into existence the small and the large. Talking about measurements over here, right? Small and large, the tall, the short, the human, the beast, the crawling creature, the flying creature, the living, the inanimate. There is no doubt that acknowledging origination requires acknowledging creation, since creation is the form of origination, so neither can dispense without the other. So over here, origination is talking about over here more of like the planning stuff, right? That originated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Type. We're good. I'm gonna summarize that again, by the way, when I bring them both together. Because I mentioned some of the scholars, they grab each of those names and they put it in sequence based on what it might mean. Okay? But what I'm pointing over here is you're gonna notice that even when they're describing the word khaliq, some scholars will point out to the estimation and planning, and some will point out to the originator of things from nothing, right? Without precedence. Right? طيب. You had a question, Sheikh? Okay. Yes. No, we don't use al. We don't use al. Right? That's only used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khaliq al-Khaliq. He's a creator, the creator. But you have to understand, so here's where things get lost in when you differ between language. You have to understand in the Arabic language, right, is different than the English when they use different things. So in a sentence, they'll say like, welcome the creator of, I don't know, Microsoft, right? But in the Arabic language, when you say al-Khaliq, it means something else. And so here's the confusion where it happens when you go between languages. The Arabic language does not permit that. The English language permits because it does not address like the only, right? Because when you say el, the definite article means the only, right? Does it make sense? Of this chair? صانع. You use the word صانع. That's what they use instead. Right? صانع الكرسي. Right? The maker or the, whatever the case is, مصور الكرسي. Right? So صانع, which means almost has like a manufactured meaning to it. Right? As opposed to creating it from nothing. Right? Or it could be like an innovative, right, aspect of it. But in the Arabic language, you can say أبدعه, which means he innovated it. But we don't use the word al-Khaliq. Allah. طيب, which one are we at? Al-Bari. Right, so Al-Bari now. Al-Bari was mentioned, so Al-Khaliq we said mentioned 11 times. Al-Bari was mentioned 3 times. Musawwar was mentioned 1 time. Right, so Al-Bari was mentioned 3 times in the Quran. Imam Jawhari said, Allah bara'a al-nasama. Al-nasama over here, which means the creation, right? So bara'a Allah. So he's saying Allah then created. Bara'a al-nasama. So he said he is also al-bari, and al-bariya means the creation. So here now he's using the word bara'a to mean to create. When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember one of the other scholars used the word khaliq also to mean to create. Ibn Jarir rahimahullah, he said Al-Bari is the one who created the creation, bringing them into existence by his power. Bringing them into existence, which means they did not exist and now they exist. So that is what he said, Al-Bari. As the judge, he said Al-Bari, it is said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bara'a the creation when he originated them. Al-Bur is creating upon a specific description. Now where's that description? That's the planning, right? The estimation. So every mabru, every mabru is created. Every mabru is a makhluk created, but not every created is a mabru. This is because bur comes from separating, right? Tabarra. Some separating. So now I brought that meaning in. Separating one thing from another. As they say, I was bara'tu min al-marad. I was cleared from or distant from illness. Or bara'tu min al-dain, which means I'm cleared from the debt. Thus, when some creation is separated, distinct from the other. So he's talking about that. Now the creations are separated from one another. They're different. And so the maker is called al-bari'. So now he's just bringing an aspect like, when he said bara, which means things are created separately and different. Al-Khattabi rahimahullah, he said, al-bari is the creator. However, this term has a specific association with living things that it does not have with other creation. So now Imam al-Khattabi's opinion is that al-bari over here has to do only things that are alive, right? Living things. You don't use that word with inanimate objects, for example. And so he said, it is rarely used for the creation of the heavens, the earth, and the mountains. It is said, Allahu bara'a an-nafs, just as it is said, Allahu bara'a al-insan, right? Allahu bara'a an-nafs, which is the soul, al-insan, which is the human being. Okay? Az-Zamakhshari rahimahullah, he said, al-bari is the one who created the creation entirely free from inconsistencies. So separate from inconsistencies. Which means essentially what he's talking about is we don't see any inconsistencies in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that He created them flawlessly with no disparity, disharmony, deficiency, defect, or flaws. They are free from all of that. Abriya from all of that. Okay? So this is the al-bari. Right? And once again, I know we probably got forgotten by now, but I'm going to bring it all together, inshallah. Now, al-musawwar on the other hand, we said it was mentioned once. Imam al-Tabari, he said regarding, when he's talking about the verse, هو خلقكم no, not that verse. What's the other verse? الذي خلقك فسواك فعدلك. خلقك فسواك فعدلك, which means خلقك, which means created you. فسواك, proportioned you. فعدلك, balanced you. So I know there's no musawwir over here, but this Ibn Tabari rahimahullah, he said, He turned you and inclined you into whatever He willed, right? So he said, remember we were talking about al-khalq? We said it has two meanings, which are what? Estimate and create from something, right? Now, we also said al-bari is to kind of lean towards, right? If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. And to separate, right? To lean towards something. طيب. Actually, tasawwar, which means to gather to yourself. That's to gather, right? But so over here, when Imam al-Jarir al-Tabari, right, when he came to the musawwar, he said, He turned you and inclined you into whatever form He willed, whether into a beautiful form or an ugly form. So he used the word sawwarahu, which means inclined you. He actually used the word sawwarahu to explain that verse. That's why I brought it here. So here he's saying sawwarahu, which means inclined you in whatever form He willed, whether it is beautiful form, an ugly form, or into a form of some of your relatives, right? To look like your relatives. So here he was talking about خَلَقَكَ فَسَوَّاكَ فَعَدَلَكَ. He said it means to sawwarak, right? To incline you to a certain form. Imam al-Khattabi, he said, al-Musawwir is the one who originated his creation in different forms so they may recognize one another. And taswir means planning and shaping. So he talked about shaping over here, right? Not just planning, but planning with shaping. Ibn Jarir, rahimahullah, he said, al-Musawwir created it however He willed and however He wills, meaning He turned you and inclined you into whatever He willed. So we're talking about now shaping once again. As the Judge rahimahullah, he said, Musawwar is the active participant form of surah. He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fashioner of every form without following a prior model or tracing a drawn outline. Subhanahu wa ta'ala is above all of that. Type. So if we synthesize all of that, right, bring all that together, right, the whole purpose of differentiating with them is to show that they are complementary, right, and not just synonyms. there's actually a different dimension to it. And many of the scholars, when they inclined, like when they talk about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they say these names are not synonyms, but rather they shine a light on a different angle and meaning. Right? And there's a lot of scholars like that. I'm going to quote 3 or 4 of them, including Imam al-Ghazali. He's a champion of that thought, of that opinion. Ibn Kathir also, he kind of mentioned this, Imam al-Tayyibi and Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. So I'm going to quote how they kind of looked at it. And so over here, so Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he said, Khalaqa is estimation and Bara'a is execution. Okay? It is the implementation and bringing of what He estimated subhanahu wa ta'ala and decreed into actual existence. Not everyone who estimates and plans something is capable of executing and bringing it into existence except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, Al-Musawwir means the one who executed what he wants to bring into existence upon the exact description he desires. So it's almost like a transition for Ibn Kathir, right? That Al-Khaliq is the planning, right? The proportion, how it's supposed to be. Al-Bara'a is the execution, bring it into existence. And Musawwir is to bring it into existence, not just, parts, but fashioned in the way based on the taqdeer and the way it's supposed to look in existence. Does this make sense? طيب. Al-Tayyib rahimahullah, he said, so Allah is the Khaliq of everything, meaning He brings it into existence from a root or from no root. Right? Whether there is something and it change it into a form or not. And He is its originator according to what wisdom dictates without flaw or imbalance, and it is fashioned into a form upon which its properties rely on its perfection and its perfection completed. So we talked khalaqa, bara'a, sawwara. Thus, estimation occurs first, then origination upon the estimated manner occurs second, then fashioning through proportioning occurs third. Right, so he brought that in order also. Now Ibn al-Qayyim said exactly the same thing. He said, Al-Bari and Al-Musawwir are detailed elaborations of the meaning of Al-Khaliq. Right? So he's saying that these are elaboration of the meanings from different angles, to bring it into existence, right, and to fashion it. Imam al-Ghazali, he said, it might be assumed that these names are synonyms and that they all just revert to the meaning of creation and invention, but it should not be so. Rather, everything that goes from non-existence to existence requires estimation first, then being brought into existence according to that estimation second, and then being fashioned after being brought into existence third. So that's how he used Al-Khaliq, Al-Bari, and Musawwir. And he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Khaliq insofar as He is the estimator, planner. He is Al-Bari insofar as He is the inventor. And He is Al-Musawwir insofar as He arranges the forms of invented things in the best arrangement. Right? Because everything in this world is created from parts. How do you put it together? What it looks, the measurements, all that is part of the fashioning. And so he said, purely bringing something into existence is one thing, and bringing it into existence according to a precise estimation is another. Okay? Now, one thing I want to mention is Wallahu A'lam, when these names are mentioned on their own, right? When they mention like Al-Khaliq is mentioned on its own, Musawwir is mentioned on its own, Al-Bari is mentioned on its own, each one of those, right, encompasses its own meaning as well as the meaning of the other two. Right? Because Khalaqa, it's there now. It means that it required planning, execution, and shaping. Right? And so when it's mentioned on its own, it will include the other two. But if they're all three mentioned, or two of them mentioned together, then they will differ in the meaning that you're looking at. Right? Wallahu a'lam. Type. So, I don't know if I should summarize this again. Type. So Imam Kathir rahimahullah, right? So Imam Kathir and all these scholars in the end, they wanted to bring all these three together. And so essentially what they're talking about is, there's step one. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is from our logical perspective, obviously, right? When it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's not how it is. From our logical thought process, you have al-Khaliq, plan and estimate, right? Before things exist. And so Allah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala perfectly measures, estimates, designs the precise parameters of everything, like, including our lifespan, our attributes, or the lifespan, everything else, attributes, right? That is planned. And then the execution, the origination happens. And so this is more of the physical execution of the plan. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pulls the creation out of the realm of non-existence into reality, into existence. And then al-musawwir, which is the fashioning and the shaper. So once it's brought into reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that creation its final, aesthetics, functional form, making each of his creation distinct, so that they can be recognized. And so you can see over here, the nuances in the name, right? So Al-Khaliq is unique in this case because it involves creating without any, also, if we're going to bring the other meanings of it. So it's creating without any sort of prior model or precedent. Right? The planning and estimation is not based on something that already exists. It's something that was without precedence. And then Al-Bari, carries with it two meanings. It's usually most used for create things that are alive. Okay, and then so not inanimate objects. We talk about animate objects. And then as he mentioned that it means he created things perfectly, right? That are free from flaw, from deficiency. And then al-musawwir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the absolute freedom and will and choose how the physical attributes are. And he fashions it in any way that he wants, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? طيب. So there's two things we need to talk about. One, the effect of believing in it, and the share of the humans of those names. Should we continue or, stop? It's been 35 minutes. It's up to you guys. Huh? Continue, you said, or end? Continue. I know somebody's going to say chai is ready. I'm not saying anything. Sheikh is trying to not make eye contact, like he's looking down. No, seriously, what do you guys want? Do you want to continue? Yes? طيب, خلاص, let's continue. طيب. So, the effects of believing in those three names, right? And subhanAllah, there's if you think about it, there's a lot of things that you can draw from believing in those names. Right? One of them has to do with the creation. So who's the only creator? Okay, here's something interesting, right? A person can say, as humans, we also create things. Right? So, how is that different than Allah creating? Yes? Yeah, pretty much. The only thing we do is utilize what's already there. That's it. Right? We can never bring something out of nothing, unless, of course, we're talking about ideas, but I'm talking about physical things, right? We cannot bring something physical from non-existence. What we can do pretty much is more of fashioning things from things that already exist. Can we come up with novel ideas? Yes, but that's not what it's not talking about. Okay? طيب. And so, because we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the true Khaliq, part of that affects us iman-wise, it means that all commands belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That He's the only one that has the right to command, to say do or don't do, halal or haram. Why? Because He's the one that creates everything. If all creations belong to Him entirely, then all commands belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, subhanAllah, we don't realize this, but a beautiful aspect of believing that Allah is the creator of everything, it makes us submit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one, because He created everything belongs to Him. He's the only one that has the right to command. So as Muslims, that includes a lot of things. That includes moral values, right? That includes what is permitted to do, what is not permitted to do. That includes what is considered right and what is considered wrong. And if you compare that to more of the secular worldview, they make the human beings in that position. They decide what is right and wrong, what is moral, what is immoral. And the end result of that is there's no such thing any longer as morality or immorality, or right or wrong. Why? Because we will disagree on it. Because we're human beings, we will look at things differently, right? We're not going to agree on things. And so we'll divide in different camps. Some will say this is moral, and some will say this is immoral. Some will say this is right, some will say this is wrong. Right? And so in the end result, what happens? You cannot say really what is right, what is wrong, what's moral and immoral. In the end, it's more like a larger vote. And over time, everything will change. Right? And so in reality, the end result, there is no morality, there is no right or wrong. Everything becomes relative. And if it's relative and subjective, then it's not there. In Islam, that's not like that. Allah created everything, it belongs to Him. He's the one that has the right to command. طيب. Now another consequence of that is that believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only Khaliq, Musawwir, and all these things, is that it necessitates pure Tawheed. Because when we believe in that name, in His, that He's the only one that does things, then we believe in His oneness, is the absolute divinity, which means that we will only single Him out in worship. Right? Because He's the only one deserving it. He's the creator of everything. He created our rizq, ourselves, our lifespan. He created the barakah in our life. And so worship needs to be dedicated only to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so that's part of that. The other thing of, if you look at creation, right, those three phases, for example, or the things around us, when you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when He created the heavens and the earth, right, في ستة أيام ثم استوى على العرش, He created them in 6 days. Of course, if Allah wanted, everything would have happened in immediately, right? Not even a day or whatever. It's like kun fayakun, that's it, done. But if we reflect on that name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what it does, it puts in our mind the whole aspect of cause and effect. Right? What do I mean by that? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He created things, He created this world, He created on basic laws, right? The cause and effect, right? That everything is connected. There's a connection between the cause and the effect. And so He subhanahu wa ta'ala does not create the result unless He creates the cause. Right? And so He does not also, He does not create thinking unless He creates intellect. Does it make sense? He does not create burning unless He created fire. He does not create plant unless He had created the seed, right, and the water. He does not create the sun unless He brings into this world the father and the mother. And so there's that cause and effect, which makes us realize that whenever we do anything, right, we have to go through the motions and understand there's cause and effect. That's different than depending on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow fruits to it. Our duty is to do the action and the motion, right? The result is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? We can't just sit there and say, food will be in my mouth. We don't do that, right? You go through the motions of whether it's hunting or buying and cooking and all these things, right? Wallah. Type. The other benefit of it, or the spiritual or imanic benefit, is that it enables us to understand the wisdom behind creation. Because when we believe in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Khaliq, Al-Khalaq, Al-Baqi, Al-Musawwir, it necessitates that we believe in His divine wisdom behind those creation. Right? Allah created something, there has to be wisdom. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create the creation in vain, right? Or because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sanctified above that. But rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation out of wisdom and purpose. There's a purpose for everything. For human beings, we understand, and then everything around us, we also understand it's meant to be utilized to fulfill our roles, right? And so it helps us establish our role of worship in a manner that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us, but utilizing everything around us for that purpose, right? Because we understand the wisdom behind all these things. Wallahu a'lam. Now, one other interesting benefit, an imanic benefit, is when we look at Allah's creation, right, we understand that Allah created everything. It makes us never ever mock anything. Right? We don't mock anything. This is really important because so Allah fashioned everything, He created everything, right? Which means if we ever mock a person or something's physical creation, shape or appearance, then really who are we mocking? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that creation didn't have a hand in how it was created or what it looked like. Right? So criticizing the craftsmanship is inherently criticizing the crafter or the craftsman. So we have to be very careful, right? Never do any of that. That's why the reason, for example, in the past predecessors, when they see somebody, when they mock a person's appearance, they say, "Are you criticizing the created, right? Or are you criticizing the creator?" Right? Because once again, it's not we should never make fun of these things, right? Wallah. Now, one of the other beautiful things of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being al-Khaliq al-Musawwir, it leads us to believe in or have certainty in the Day of Judgment or resurrection. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this quite often, in the Quran, right? من يبدأ الخلق ويعيده, right? الذي أنشأه أول مرة, right? والذي خلقه الذي فطره. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that analogy. So if you realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala originated everything from nothing, then He is capable of bringing it back from death. Right? So these two are connected. One of the other benefits, and this is the last benefit I'm going to mention, inshallah, is that it brings into our mind the whole concept of khilafah, stewardship. Right, stewardship. And what I mean by that? Stewardship in everything, including the environment around us, everything that's around us. Because when we recognize that every plant, every animal, right, every mountain was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, and brought into existence by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and fashioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a specific way, it will install into us this deep respect for everything around us. Right? And so as a believer, we end treating everything around us, right, not as a source of something that belongs to us. We don't treat it recklessly, but more of as a sacred thing that belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a dripping sound? Okay. It's not raining, right? Alhamdulillah. But anyway, so if you realize that everything is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is gonna make us realize that it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when we deal with it, we don't deal with it as it belongs to us, but it's more that we've been given stewardship over it. Right? That includes everything, right? Our wealth. Is it ours or Allah's? He created it. Right? It just our bodies, you're right. Right? Allah gave us khilafah over our bodies, so we have to be careful what we do with it, what we put into it, how we utilize it. Are we we're gonna be responsible? Are we keeping it healthy or not? Right? All these things put us in mind. And subhanAllah, in modern day, that our bodies is something that's important. We have to understand that aspect, right? Our children is included in that, everything around us. Wallah. Type. Now, when we talk about our share of that name, right? Now, once again, we do understand that, absolute creation from nothing, that only belongs to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because I'm just going to use that three consecutive, when you go back, khalaqa, bara'a, sawwara, right? Planned, executed, shaped, or perfected, right? So if we look at it this way, then we can understand how we can bring that in our lives. And then I'm going to mention also Imam Ghazali. Imam Ghazali had another take on it. So our share of khaliq, the word khaliq right now, then it means more of a strategic estimator, right? That we plan. And so this, once again, from the Arabic word of taqdeer, right? Precise estimation or planning. And so our share of that name is we exercise foresight, strategic planning. We exercise design before taking any action. Right? And so the human creator, I'm going to use that word, the human creator sits down, reflects, plans, measures, maps everything, right? Out of like a, let's say, a vision or whatever it is. And if we're delivering, for example, a long-term organizational strategy, right? We have to build into it, like, the multi-track educational, like, aspects, whether it's curriculum for education and so forth. And so this is the khalq phase, right? The creation phase. And so when we look at raw materials, right? When we're planning, we're going to look at raw materials, the time availability, the, like, the community's need, for example, what is the ultimate goal, and so the blueprint we're going to put, all that is part of planning. And so we're not just reacting to things around us. No, we're thoughtfully thinking, we're estimating, the scope and sequence of the project. So that is that share. Now comes the next one of our share of al-bari, is more of now the execution, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings that plan into reality, into existence, free from any sort of defect, separated, right? Separated from any deficiency or disharmony. And so our share of that name is through, disciplined execution, right? Disciplined execution and operational excellence. That's how we bring it out. And so I'm going to use the example of a curriculum, right? An education curriculum or a strategic plan. It means that, it will remain on paper. So there's a curriculum, it's on paper. The plan, the blueprint is on paper, right? Until what happens? It's not going to come to life until it becomes executed, right? And so the human originator, the planner, he comes and essentially starts rolling up their sleeve, and they bring this plan up into the physical manifestation in this world. And so this is the face of, that moves from organization and schedule to launching whatever you want to launch, whether it's a workshop or, construction, whatever it is, right? Now, bringing into that the meaning of al-bari, which means kind of separate or free from inconsistencies, our goal is, when we do these things, we have integrity in them. We do them with ihsan, right? We do them the best humanly possible, right? And so, structured, reliable, free from, chaotic mismanagement, and so forth, as much as we can. Now, when it comes to al-musawwir, right, which is the fashioner, our share of it is to exercise more of the, tailoring, contextualization, the aesthetic refinements that are associated with it. I guess this is kind of like the if we're talking about, education, it's the art of pedagogy, right? The art of teaching, right? That's the decoration of it. Because you can have solid curriculum, for example, a functioning classroom, we brought it into life, right? But what is the shape you're going to deliver it in, right? The delivery is the shape and the form you're going to deliver it in, right? And so this is more of the fashioning of the aspect of it, type. So essentially, to master our share of the names, right? To be, essentially we become complete builders of everything. So from the idea, the inception of the idea, the planning, right, to the move the next phase, the work of the execution, and ending with the fashioning of it, right? Wallah. Now, Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, I'm not going to quote his statement as usual. I'm going to summarize what he mentioned. So Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he mentioned that we cannot, as human beings, we cannot embody the name of the creation, right? But rather it's more of metaphorical, rooted in our capacity of knowledge, our capacity of pioneering, capacity of spiritual discipline. And so he breaks it down into kind of two distinct dimensions. The first one is our share of al-musawwir, right? He looked at al-musawwir first, the fashioner. So he looked more of internal fashioning, right? Like cognitive mirroring of things. So he said a human cannot literally physically fashion the universe. But what he can do is he can fashion a perfect reflection of it, right? Fashion in his own mind. Meaning what? Meaning that you study things around it, right? Like you study the micro-universe. You study the human anatomy, the biology. You look at it, what it looks like. Why is it the way it is? and that includes also things that in the unseen, like angels, right, or our iman, spiritual level, until our minds contain like a precise, complete image of reality. So that's what we're talking about mirror over here, right? Now, this is different, of course, than there's a difference between the divine and the human in this aspect. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we're talking about knowledge over here, right? You're mirroring the reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge causes reality to exist. Right? Allah's knowledge causes reality to exist. On the other hand, this reality causes the human knowledge to exist. Right? Because we're reflecting, we're looking around, this is how we attain knowledge. And so when a human being perfectly aligns their internal image or cognitive image with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's external physical reality, then this is how they achieved al-musawwir. Because you can imagine everything in your mind. The more you know, the better you are, an aspect of it. So it's not just human beings have head and arms and legs. No, it's reflecting a bit more, how, why, get more deeper knowledge of it, the wisdom behind it. That's more of what he's talking about. Now, the other phase of it, which is the share of al-Khaliq and al-Bari, right? Al-Bari and Musawwir. No, al-Bari, al-Khaliq and al-Bari. So over here, what he's talking about this. Now, in this aspect, he started from Musawwir for a reason, because he said it's possible for humans. But he said true creation is bringing something out of nothing, which belongs only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for humans, we are granted limited knowledge and power to create metaphorically, right, through innovation. And so what he's saying is, he's talking about the process of this is that when a human being leads or takes in charge of something that is unprecedented, that is highly beneficial. He's always looking at, that's a condition he has, it has to be beneficial. So non-beneficial things are not considered bari or khaliq, right? They're useless in his mind, Imam Ghazali. So he said, whether it's like a new craft or a method of governance in politics or a system of spiritual discipline, they act as the originator, right? So this is more of the innovator, when a person innovates something. This is what he brought in. Now, once again, the Imam Ghazali puts a condition that it must be beneficial, right, for it to be considered an innovation, as something that's positive. Because he warns that he needs to bring goodness for it to be praiseworthy, right? Leading something that is useless or that bring distraction, right? And he mentions specifically innovating board games. That's what Imam Ghazali said, not me, right? Board games, for example, he looks at it, he said it does not reflect the divine attribute. Because remember, we want to integrate that into our life. Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He creates, there's a wisdom behind it, right? There's a benefit behind it. And so Imam Ghazali, when he looks at board games, his opinion is that these board games are a waste of time. Right? They eat at your time, they're not beneficial. Right? Difference of opinion. Like Imam Shafi'i, for example, he said chess is something good. Why? It's a game, but what does it do? Strategy, using logic. Right? And so for example, board games that are considered negative or shouldn't be doing is for example, the snake and ladder, right? Snake and ladder is just rolling dice. That's it. There's nothing to it. But chess, on the other hand, there's something to it, right? And so this is where you can draw a distinction with Allah. طيب. And so he's saying, these things that are not beneficial, they do not reflect the divine attributes of creation. True human origination must serve the betterment of society and the soul. طيب. Now, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he placed a what he considered a rule, and so he concludes an aspect of a theological belief safeguard. So he said, we must never confuse the shared vocabulary with shared reality, like khaliq, musawwir, bari, right? As human beings, we have shared vocabulary. We should never confuse it with the shared reality. He said, when a human is called a creator or a fashioner, It is a distant metaphor. The gap between the Creator's infinite power and the created being's borrowed capabilities remain absolute. Right? This is why when we're saying you cannot say yourself as khaliq, or when somebody says khalaqtuha, I created it, it's not the same as when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created something. Wallahu a'lam. طيب. We'll stop here inshallah. That's not bad. 1 hour is good. Huh? Chai is here? Jazakumullah khair. Perfect timing. Alhamdulillah. Subhanakallah walhamdulillah, astaghfirullah. So I guess no more, this is the last one inshallah. We'll start in September. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah walhamdulillah, astaghfirullah.